I'm John Griggs.
And you're here today watching the Falconry Podcast. And John, we're really excited today.
Yeah.
Because we have a very special guest today. We have a prolific, amazing falconer and author who has influenced falconry all over the world, Matt Mullenix. Matt, thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, it's a pleasure, really. An honor and fun.
Well, we're glad you took time out, and I think we kind of wanted to talk about a lot of different things. But first, we were hoping if you don't know who Matt is, you need to come out from under a rock. But I don't know kind of your early background. What got you into falconry? What drew you to the sport, and maybe kind of a little bit of your history in it?
Well, briefly, I'm 52 now. I started when I was 13, so almost 40 years ago.
Back in the 1900s.
Back in the day, around turn of the century, and I was in Panama at the time, the Republic of Panama, Central America, and got in with a group of wildlife rehabilitators, which a lot of people picked up wildlife there. They were really sort of no rules, and you kind of took home whatever you wanted to take home, and found an owl on the way home, a baby owl that some kids were poking a stick at, and took it home. It turns out my neighbor was the base. So my dad was in the military. So we were raised in the military. My neighbor was the base veterinarian, and he told me, he said, son, if you raise this and release it, I will give you more. And if you raise it and keep it as a pet, I will never speak to you again. And so, being 13, I was super impressionable and definitely wanted to raise the thing. So I told him, yeah, absolutely, whatever you need me to do. And that got me into the group of wildlife rehabilitators, all raptors for me, which sort of ended up with a broad-winged hawk that had migrated down. So one of them, hundreds of thousands that migrate down through Panama. Yeah. It's like you can actually see them down there during migration. It's like a river of birds overhead. It's truly amazing. It's incredible. Swainson's hawks, broad-winged hawks, and turkey vultures. And one of those, probably, thousands of them basically starved to death on the way down. And this was one of those that would have. But I had stolen some falconry books from the library, and I had made little jesses and a little crude lure, and I was like putting socks, on the heads of my owls to hood them, and it
sounds
was
like
mess.
A John made it hood to me.
Yeah, it was a mess. But that's how I started, and then when I got to the States, I found a sponsor. You got into this would have been 1985. And not driving yet. That would wait another year, but got a sponsor and got a permit, and the rest has been here in the States.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's a very different approach, because I think everybody has their own version. I mean, John and I both kind of my side of the mountain. Yeah, you hear that a lot, where people get, this is a thing. So that's really unique.
Right.
What were some of your favorite species down there you got to see and work with?
Well, so I was really lucky. This veterinarian that I mentioned also ran an institution called Summit Gardens in Panama, which is essentially a zoo, sort of zoological collection. And he had harpy eagles and crested eagles and bat falcons and all kind of native raptors. And my dad was also associated, being in the military, with what they called the jungle training school in Panama, and that also had a zoological collection which had white hawks and black hawks and a bunch of neat stuff that they just sort of had in cages there. And so I spent a lot of time between Summit Gardens and the jungle training school. And then Dr. Gale, Nate Gale is the man that I'm speaking of, and his house was essentially its own zoological garden. He had his wife raised wildcats. So when you would walk in, there would be an ocelot or a margay or a mountain lion would jump at you from the couch. He had a potu, which you know those are sort of owl-like, sort of frog mouth.
Things are sitting on the post a lot.
Yeah, and it would sit in the bookshelf, and you would throw a mouse in the kitchen, and it would go down and catch the mouse, and then get back up in the bookshelf. Toucans, all kind of stuff. But he had, for a little while, he had a bat falcon, and the bat falcon was going to the Peregrine Fund, and I had no idea what the Peregrine Fund was or who it was, but it was destined to go there, and so that was one of the first birds that I had on the fist and fed, and and then, like I say, I've still got a crested eagle feather that I just picked up in his backyard from the breeding pair he had there. Just a wonderful arrangement. Now, if I went back, what I would do is I would try to trap every forest falcon and try all of those.
Yes.
I would just go nuts. Yeah, but I had no idea. I actually I did go for a couple of weeks on a bird banding trip with an international group while I was down there, and I was 14. But we went and stayed in tents in the woods, and we ran trap lines, basically mist nets, through the jungles in a place called Pipeline Road, which birders will be familiar with. And we trapped a barred forest falcon that had come in to try to eat one of the birds that we had caught in the mist net, and so I, of course, I had no actual practical experience, and I had only read, what the names of the birds were. So I said, "Oh, it looks like a goosehawk," and the guy very kindly said, "Oh, you mean a goshawk?" And yes, it does sort of look like a little tiny goshawk. It was a barred forest falcon, which is sort of gray and has bars and et cetera, but obviously a falcon. Anyway, so lots of neat stuff down there. I'm still fascinated by it. Still, retirement when it comes, I'm heading somewhere.
Yeah, they have a lot of neat birds down there. I've seen a lot of pictures of different things, and Ben will suddenly send me a picture and say, "Look at this thing," and then we start to talk about the possible genesis of the creature and where it came from, or the bird, and what it might be related to, just because there are some certain similarities, and obviously birds migrated or changed locations as they've evolved, so a lot of them are related, and it's really neat to think about how those things may have come to pass.
Well, the falcons in particular being so they evolved in the New World, which I think we all agree, and but the diversity between the caracaras and the forest falcons and all the true falcons, and just an amazing diversity of neat critters.
And it's mostly untapped to falconry. That's why I wish I had an entire separate life just to do neotropical New World raptors.
How many lives do we get? How many separate lives do we get to have?
Well, that depends on your religion, I guess.
Yeah. Let's hope we get enough, because man, that would be just heaven, just to try out new species, New World species that haven't been really worked with. So that's a treat.
So segue, that actually is the genesis of my interest in kestrels, which I think is something that we can all when we get into falconry, we try to figure out what the birds are that we want to hunt with, what the birds are that we can hunt with, and the weird stuff that just appeals to us for no good reason. And when I was coming up, kestrels were definitely in the latter category. I mean, American kestrels were sort of tied to European kestrels in a way. Not considered to be of any value by the people that I was learning from at the time.
Yeah.
Until I went to Louisiana with my sponsor and found out that, of course, everybody in Louisiana was flying American kestrels back in the 80s and very well and catching a lot of game with them. But that was all news to me. But this idea that that we're always interested in the exotic. And we have some exotic here, with us. And I know that you two in particular are like engaged in discussion about, what's weird to think about.
Absolutely,
which I happen to think is a great, aspect of falconry. And while I'm a big proponent of actually practical falconry, falconry that actually works, that we know works, that has worked for 1,000 years, there's always room for new falconry.
Yeah.
And if we didn't agree to that, if we didn't agree that we're all sort of excited about, some new weird thing, there would be no innovation.
It just would be stagnant.
It would be stagnant, right? So cheers to everybody who thinks about weird hawks, us included, maybe us especially, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm of the mind.
The weirdos who are being open-minded.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've always been of the mind that there's probably a few species out there that are probably not really well suited for falconry, but I think that of the numbers that we actually use, if you bring it down to what people actually use right now in falconry, even worldwide, it's a small fraction of what is possible. And so I try to keep my mind open. Like even when people talk about, well, I want to do falconry, but I want to do it with owls, even though I think most of those are probably not really well suited for them, it doesn't mean that it's not worth a shot. And maybe I'm not the one to go and give it a shot, but I would love to support and talk to the person who does take that chance.
Yeah.
Well, and even being open-minded, even if you don't do it, if you talk about it, even if you get your brain working in different ways, if you're like, oh, what if you flew a secretary bird? It's like, that's not practical. Why? What's good? What's bad? What's stupid? What's effective? What is the brain of that bird? Just even talking about it is good because it gets you thinking in outside of the box.
Well, and also I think it's useful, thought experiment, thought exercise, because it also reinforces why the normal hawks are great, right?
Yeah.
Like why the recognizable hawks are great. I mean, if we sit down and do some sort of matrix of pluses and pros and cons about the secretary bird, we're going to find out a Harris hawk is a pretty dang good falconry bird.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that so all of those explorations are useful, whether they discover a new hawk or not. But John, I totally agree that there are probably dozens. I mean, at least dozens of birds that would be excellent falconry birds that we just don't know about, or nobody has ever tried. I'm I describe myself as a proponent of practical falconry. I mean, I like falconry that works, and I as much as I have tried, I have not been able to really get excited about falconry that doesn't work, and that's probably prevented me from some level of enjoyment of my red-shouldered hawks and my my other sort of experimental birds that while on one level they can work well, I just can't make them be all things to all people.
Right.
And when you return to the birds that are all things to all people, you realize exactly what are the criteria that a real good falconry bird needs.
Well, it's weird too. I was thinking how much of it is also based off of the human part of the equation.
Yes.
If humans were all 2 feet tall, we might have a different attitude of what bird, logistically and ergonomically worked for what we were hunting and what we were doing, or if we were all giants, maybe the golden eagle would be the red-tailed hawk of falconry if we were all 15 feet tall.
All right, so we're nerding out like immediately. This is like,
well, Ben's on the call, so that's...
I agree. And again, I think all of that is useful. That is useful thinking, because it may lead to some insight that will be useful and generalizable, but also because it reinforces what we already know, and lets you feel comfortable with the fact that it might not be the sexiest thing to fly the bird that everybody else is flying, but if everybody else is flying it, it's probably because it works. Mm-hmm. And especially where you are with the quarry that you have, the bird that most people are catching that quarry with is probably the best bird to fly, and and nobody should apologize for that.
Yeah,
I mean, I think there's a difference between sort of, honest exploration of something new, where it can fail. You probably expect it to fail on some level. You'd be surprised if it succeeded greatly. You'd be surprised if you were the first person who succeeded with it. And then there's the the sort of the pursuit of what works, which is another of course tried and true avenue in falconry to actually follow the people who catch the most game, figure out what kind of hawks they're flying, what kind of quarry they're flying, what kind of habitat they're in, and emulate that. Like do that, and if you need to be a little bit competitive to do it a little bit better than they do it, I think that's great. But it's this interplay between sort of I have a have a nerd streak in me. I do allow myself to think weird thoughts about what sort of falconet I want to fly at moths or whatever. But at the end of the day, I'm a dirt hawker. I mean, I like to go out and catch stuff with my hawks, and I am genuinely not satisfied when that doesn't happen, and that's a limiting factor for me. So it turns out there are actually few hawks wherever you live. There are relatively few hawks that will actually work on a day-to-day basis, on a regular basis. If I were to invite you out hawking, I would take you out with my kestrel. I would take you out with a Harris hawk. I would take you out with a red-tailed hawk. Around here, we would feel pretty confident that we're going to catch something, sight unseen. Any place I take you is going to be pretty good. Any slip we get is going to be pretty good. I get you 3 slips, I'm going to catch you something. And the experiments notwithstanding, the truth of the matter is that not everything works everywhere.
Very true.
But how do you know that except by trying it, and how do you know that except by failing, at something else? So you have to succeed where it works and fail where it doesn't work, and then split the difference for kind of for the rest of your life, I guess. I don't know.
That makes sense.
That transitions well into your I think it's your most recent book, For Falconry Fundamentals. Where you talk specifically about that, and it's actually I found it to be interesting. Yeah, that's the one.
There it is.
Yeah, there it is.
Now
everybody go out and buy a copy. We're gonna have.
I just happen to have all my books in front of me.
Strange. Let's take a look. Guys, just show really quick. Let's see. Take a look at the books you've written.
Okay, so this is the new one, For Falconry Fundamentals. We'll talk about it. It's essentially practical falconry, why it works in I think non-controversial, simple language. Too simple for some people's preference, I think.
Absolutely a must-have for every apprentice. That should be the first book you buy.
Thank you for that.
I've been telling people this because every time I speak with a lot of apprentices, and because I'm a moderator on our Facebook group, so they usually will come through me, and I'll make sure that they're a falconer and everything. But anyway, I send them links to your books. I send them links to a couple of YouTube channels from Utah, including Ben's. And I tell them, you need to read this book to start with. Why? Because you got to understand the fundamentals before you start adding anything else in. And it's the best book out there for that.
Well, I appreciate that very much. I mean, that's the message that I would love to have everybody, take home, is that it's, first of all, that there are fundamentals, that there are things that actually make falconry work, and we do tend to muddle them up quite a bit, when in fact there's 5. I said there's 4, but maybe there's 6. Maybe there's I don't think there's less than 4, and the 4 that I think there are in the book.
But you got to start somewhere.
You got to start somewhere, and if you have a mastery of those 4, and we'll talk about them, your falconry will work. Mm-hmm. It will work. You will catch game. You will come home most days with something in the bag, and that's I think a great place to start. That's not the end of falconry. That's not the end of your career. It's not the pinnacle of anybody's career, but it's a great place to start. Mm-hmm. So quickly, American Kestrels in modern falconry. This is one that started as an article in the Florida Falconry Fraternity's newsletter.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
The first book I read of yours.
Well, that's
back in
the first book I wrote of mine.
2003.
Yeah. That's good.
I think is when I wrote it.
Yeah.
Read it.
It's a coincidence.
Oh yeah.
And this was from essentially a period in which I had flown almost nothing but kestrels for about 10 years, and had some success and figured out, I think, at least what were the few things that led to that success. And it's not, again, my own invention per se. Like, so I went to Louisiana from Georgia, saw adult people when I was 15 catching game with kestrels, which I had never heard as even possible. And so got a germ of the possibility in that experience. And then when I was able to replicate it myself, even with very little experience and very few skills, that's a clue. That tells you something about the bird. If a lot of apprentices are catching game with a thing, a red-tailed hawk or a kestrel, it's a pretty good bird. It
Absolutely.
Means it's you're basically covering a lot of bases, and the bird is meeting you more than halfway. And so I have not in the last 40 years but been convinced that American kestrels are in that category of bird.
Agreed.
They are like a red tail. They're the red tail of the small hawks. If you want to get into microfalconry, it's your red tail. If you don't catch game with it, it might be something you're doing wrong. Because it's not the bird.
Especially if you're doing something like car hawking. They are pros at it.
Yeah.
And
so
what's interesting,
understanding of the fact that you're setting up an ambush and that you've got a bird that can handle an ambush and wants an ambush and looks for ambushes everywhere, from the day it's born.
Yeah.
Then you've got a partner in that, So I guess what I'm saying is, at the level of skill that you are as a new falconer, it'll definitely meet you there.
Yep.
And it can provide you success. And if you're an experienced falconer, all the more success you're going to have, because it's a good bird. It likes to hunt. We have this observation all the time when we get together with people who are familiar with kestrels, and we're flying them and catching starlings and basically having a good time. It's that we realize that the birds are having a good time also. And you don't always get that sense with every hawk that you have that it's really enjoying itself. But I think with kestrels, I get that sense that they like it. They see what you're after, and they like it.
There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, and I don't know, I'm curious if you realized this at the time you were writing that book, that what was happening, I guess, down in Louisiana at the time was not something that was common around the United States. That people weren't catching kestrels or catching stuff with kestrels by the dozens in other places. Because I think that there was a stigma where they were viewed as being a toy, a parlor bird,
that's
a pet.
the exact thing a lot of old timers said. They're like,
yeah.
When I was actually pursuing I got into falconry when I was young, maybe 10, 12 years old, but didn't actually get into it where I was flying a bird until I was about 22, I think, after I met Ben. But I called a bunch of people saying, hey, I want to fly a kestrel. I want to fly a kestrel, because I was living in an apartment. There was no way I was having a red-tailed hawk in there. And every single person I called, oh, kestrels they're a waste. They're just a toy. They're not a real bird. You need to get a red-tailed hawk. And I'm like, I really think that these things are worthwhile. And during that process, I bought your book and I read it, and I'm like, no, look, the people are having success with these things, and they're way better than it seems. Then I get down to the list where I'm calling Ben Woodruff. He was at the bottom of the list. The W's.
Yeah, you got all the way down to the Woodruffs.
Yeah, and Ben's like, no, kestrels are great. And I'm like, I want you to sponsor me. And so that's that. But yeah, your book inspired me. Yeah.
And helped so many people just be like, oh, wait a minute. People are looking at this bird wrong. They're giving it,
Right. And so just to be clear, the germ of it was my attempt to replicate what was already being done. And I always try to make that point clear. I mean, there are people who are still practicing falconry today who were in that in that first, Louisiana Falconers Club banquet that I sat in and listened to the stories, and then went out hawking with them the next day and saw it myself. And those people are still practicing falconry, so this is not ancient, history. But it has been practiced for quite a long time. And I think, part of the reason why Louisiana, if I can say, being now, I've been here for 25 years. I'm not a Louisianan, but I've been here longer than anywhere else in my life. Louisianans are practical people, and Louisiana falconers are very practical falconers. So there's not a lot of esoteric falconry in Louisiana. There's not a lot of, thought leadership on how high, your bird should weight on in Louisiana. And what there is a tremendous amount of practical knowledge and experience in actually catching stuff, with a wide variety of hawks that actually can catch stuff in this environment that we have here, which is basically hot and thick, but generally game rich, and our seasons are pretty long. We're never snowed out, in Louisiana. So that's. Those people trained my sponsor, even though I kind of grew up in Georgia with a sponsor from Georgia, Ricky Schomburg. He was a student of Tom and Jennifer Colson, who are sort of the I hate to call them, the grandparents of Louisiana falconry, because they'll be upset about that. But Tom could be a granddad. Jennifer couldn't, but Tom could. But at any rate, they were, hugely influential to me, and I think to everybody who's encountered their work and sort of the body of the work, but also their book, the Harrison Hawk Revolution, which is a great read. So that's where I came from. You expected to catch something, and if you did not catch something, you were up for a little bit of derision. You were up for a little bit of ribbing, and it may be more than a little bit, which was kind of tough when you're 13, 14, 15, and you're relegated to hunting during lunch, which is where they put the red tails back then. As a Harris Hawk and Kestrel thing, because or some accipiters as well. But if you could hunt on the way to the rabbit field and catch 3 starlings, and then catch 15 rabbits in the field, and then hunt starlings on the way to lunch, then whatever that was you were flying, those were good birds. If you had a red tail, you were sort of relegated to, those were Harris Hawks and Kestrels. Red tails were relegated to lunch. So I would go out during lunch and catch a rabbit with a red tail, and but somehow survived that to become a Harris Hawker and join the rest of the crowd and the fun with that. In Georgia, I was hunting squirrels with red tails mostly. That's mainly what we did. That's largely what happens, I think, in Georgia today, which I'm thankful for.
Most of the East, really.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic fit, and we were lucky to have red tails and lucky to have gray squirrels, because it really works well. It's a wonderful pairing. Not that red tails can't catch, basically everything else under some circumstance or another.
Yeah,
squirrels are like perfecto. And
well, there's a reason everyone's doing it. In the East, there really is,
and that's right. So I think in that sense, you're looking at kind of broad habitat change in the country over time. The one thing that follows, they clear all the land and then they put houses there, but give it 20 years, it's squirrel habitat. And trees grow up pretty quickly, and if they're hardwoods, they're going to have squirrels there. So, gray squirrels are now basically coast to coast. All that has kind of changed in our lifetime, and I think that's not going to go away. You look at the habitat where people are, and that's what we're going to have.
Yeah.
And so, to John, to your earlier point about urban falconry and suburban falconry, and sort of man affected falconry. So that would be all of agriculture. Right. These are places where we really have to learn to do it well, and we have to learn to like it, because there isn't going to be sage grouse hawking in sagebrush.
That's right.
That is I mean, right now it's the province of like 9 people, you know, like,
it's sad, but true.
Yeah. And next week it'll be the province of 4 people. And, you know, so.
We've even had the rabbit hemorrhagic disease here that has absolutely cored out our rabbit populations. And these are the very areas that are going to end up being houses, these areas where there's rabbits right now. So hopefully in the next couple of years, there'll be a resurgence of rabbit falconry in Utah. But right now, we're already being pushed to trying other things. And a lot of that with people with things like Harris's and even red tails and most falcons would be ducks here in Utah. But then we've got the avian influenza that's hit. And that can be absolutely devastating to most raptors that come in contact with it. So it's like, okay, so we can't hunt ducks. Okay, so we can't hunt rabbits because they're so depopulated. You're lucky to get a couple of slips a day, if that, maybe one. So what's left? Well, there are huge populations of quail in the cities. There are starlings, there are sparrows. And so those are like, hey, look, these are still game. And I hate it when people look at these things and say, well, that's, you know, hawking your kestrel out of a car on a starling. That's not sporting. Well, that's the words of someone who has never seen a kestrel wrestle a starling. That's how I feel about that.
Yeah, or take a long slip at a starling. You know, or catch a starling on the rise. Or frankly catch a starling after a tail chase, which is really not a great like outcome you know, for urban falconry. You don't want a tail chase, and you know, but I have picked my kestrels up off the top of, you know, Blockbuster you know outlets and etc. And you know, falconry will continue, and good falconry will be possible, but we're going to have to change what we think of as good falconry. We'll have to challenge ourselves to make good falconry where it might not exist yet, or it might be easier to do poor falconry. You know, I don't want to be the guy who advocates for bad falconry. Like I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be, you know, the car hawk you know, guru. And I hope I am not by recommending kestrels. So kestrels are great at car hawking. There's no question about that. I mean, I don't think anybody who has seen it or done it would ever argue that they don't like it and they aren't good at it. I mean, you literally can make a stack of starlings that way.
They do other things too, though.
But they do other things, and people are exploring the other things that they do. And people have, you know, frankly, have been doing the other things with kestrels for a long time. Which is not to say that kestrels are like infinitely, you know, versatile either. I don't think, you know, very few hawks are infinitely versatile.
They all have their abilities and their limitations.
Yes, yeah, and I think really the challenge is for us to work within those limitations and to pursue and to appreciate the things that can be done within those limitations. And if we're doing that, then we're really not doing anything different than any kind of falconry that has ever been done, which is because all falconry is limited, right? So all falconry, regardless of, you know, if you're hunting sagebrush and you've got like, you know, snow-capped mountains in the background and you know, the crunch of snow under your feet and this, you know, vast wilderness, you're still hunting within limitations. You know, limitations of the golden eagle eating your bird and you losing the bird and sage grouse being hard to hunt and hard to catch and hard to kill. There's always been limitations to falconry. So why can't we just, you know, titrate those limitations and you know, adapt them to the environment that we have? And I think that's important. I think if falconry is going to survive, we will do that. I look at, you know, speaking of YouTube videos, I look at some falconry in China, for example, which seems like way more urban than I would be comfortable with.
And crowded streets and stuff. I mean,
it's, like
people eating on the streets and they're diving in and out of crowds.
Yeah, right. And you know, like going to market basically and hawking around the people's feet, and that's clearly working. And you know, you look at some kids, and I've seen video of kids in Mexico City flying, you know, kestrels basically in alleys successfully off the fist at house sparrows. And who's to say that they won't, develop the finest possible appreciation of falconry that has ever been developed. Mm-hmm. Because what else will they know? They will have the same bond with the hawk. They will have the same, excitement of the chase. They will have the same feeling of success at doing something difficult. And some of them are going to write about it. And this to me is like a hopeful, it's a hopeful scenario. Not that I want the whole world to be sort of Blade Runner, kind of, landscape. But if it is, I think we're still going to be there. Somebody's going to be there. There's going to be some opportunity there.
Well, no doubt the world will change. I mean, the neighborhoods and the houses and the developments will be ever expanding. There's really not much of a way to stop that. However, it doesn't mean that we have to give up falconry. And I think that to your points, we just have to be adaptable. And I think kestrels and other micros are just a perfect example of that.
Yeah. So somewhere I read, and I can't remember where. I wish I had the citation, but it's a simple thought, and it is there are always more small birds than big birds, mm-hmm. and that's the case. So speaking back to the fundamentals, the first fundamental of falconry is prey base. The first fundamental, long before you think about what kind of birds you need to get or what kind of hawking you're going to do or where you live, is what do you have to hunt? And a truism of falconry that you will eventually discover, whether you know it now or not, is that you need a lot of what you're trying to hunt in order to catch a few of them. You need a lot. And we don't write about that. We don't talk about that. Maybe it's just depressing to think about. But the fact is, you need a lot more of what you're trying to hunt than you will ever catch.
Yeah, you're not using a gun. You need 3 to 5 good slips every time you go out, at least.
That's a good hawk. That's a hawk that you can bank on. That's a hawk you're proud of. That's a hawk you write about on your Facebook page.
It's a made bird.
Look, this is a hawk you keep, frankly. For years. That catches 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 of what it goes after. All right. So. But in order to have 5 slips, you need to have 50 birds.
Yeah.
Because not all those 50 are going to be vulnerable, right? Yep. Not all of those 50 are going to put themselves in a position where you can even get a slip at them.
Yeah.
So, and then to see 50 birds, you got to have 500 birds that, most of them you don't see. It's just the habitat produces them and the habitat, supports them. Mm-hmm. So, when you think about we just because we're people and we don't like to think real hard about anything, we really focus on the one picture of the one hawk with the one head of game, and that's what we post, and we think, man, that's just fantastic, that person is doing great, and what you don't see is all the ones they missed before they caught that one, and all the ones they saw that the hawk never even flew at. And all the ones that that got bulldozed yesterday in the adjacent field. It's just a vast pyramid, inverted pyramid of resource that needs to exist in order to have that one photograph of the bird, on the prey. Mm-hmm. And so to my point in trying to illustrate this in a book or in an infographic or in any things that I try to do, it's really to try to hit home this idea that the tip of the iceberg is what we're really excited about, but it takes the whole iceberg to make it happen.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't talk about that.
And back to our topic of urban hawking. Well, there's an iceberg in urban hawking, right? It's whatever animals are happen to live with us, and it's it's probably going to change, but right now it's a lot of blackbirds, the Icteridae, which in Louisiana, I hasten to say, in Louisiana we have a season on blackbirds. So blackbirds are legal quarry in Louisiana. They're not legal quarry everywhere. These are red-winged blackbirds, grackles, cowbirds, for example. You can hunt them in Louisiana, and we do.
Sadly, not here, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we're thankful to be able to. But this is an animal that's as much of an opportunist about human environment as a starling or a house sparrow.
Yeah.
There have never been this many cowbirds. There have never been this many grackles. There have never been this many, red-winged blackbirds in the fields here, except that the fact that we have the agriculture that supports them, and supports them to such a degree that they're considered pests. So,
they eat a lot of the food, or grain. They eat all sorts of things at these farms, so they're going to be considered as such. And we created that environment for that to happen, so it's not like they're bad or anything. But
exactly. Not that I think that we should blame red-winged blackbirds for being red-winged blackbirds. And I happen to know that there's an entire population of birders in the Northeast who actually watch red-winged blackbirds get born and almost know them by name, and realize that they go down south and get killed by the U.S. government in hundreds of thousands because they're eating our rice. So it's there's always 2 or 3 ways to look at a situation. But my point is that there's always going to be something that lives with people, and that something is going to have enough volume to make falconry possible, and the volume that is required to make falconry possible is also a volume that can make falconry good. Because for every, if you need a lot of quarry to catch anything, but you need a ton of quarry to catch something well. Like if you want to be specific about your flight, if you want to have, a pitch at such a degree, a stoop at such a degree, hunt a specific kind of quarry and none other, you need a lot of quarry. Yeah. Okay, that's a fact. And I don't think many of us, especially young falconers, have any idea how many that is. I mean, black in the sky volume is a good place to start.
Yeah.
And if if you're in those numbers, so when I just to speak on that, I last couple of years I've had the pleasure to go to Arkansas and hunt with some guys in Arkansas who hunt snipe, which is extremely esoteric quarry, super difficult to catch. They hunt them with tertial peregrines and hybrids, and they all, I think, to the person, I would say, do it exceptionally well. And this is difficult elsewhere. This is like you get a snipe flight, 2 or 3 times a season elsewhere. I've caught 2 with kestrels, like by accident. But that's not snipe hawking. All right. Snipe hawking is where you have hundreds and hundreds of snipe, and you're able to like perfect your flight by days and days and days and weeks and months and years of practice, of practical falconry, except you just have a ton of snipe. And what it makes is snipe falconry possible. So this is something that that like in Louisiana or in Florida, where we try to hunt snipe. Other places that are even worse, like Louisiana's not even that bad. Florida's not that bad. I mean, they're wintering places for snipe. But Arkansas, and maybe Arkansas is not alone, but Arkansas is fantastic. Not to now I'm going to have everybody mad at me in Arkansas because I'm sending a bunch of people to Arkansas. Well, good luck trying to catch them because they're hard to catch, and these guys know how to do it. But my point is they got a bunch of them, and that's very important. And anywhere you go where you see great falconry, I saw great falconry in California this year. Had the pleasure to go talk at the California Hawking Club meet, and got out to go out with the guys flying Merlins, and they've got a tremendous habitat. It's all agricultural, but it's the right agricultural for these Jack Merlins that they're flying. It's the right quarry for the Jack Merlins that they're flying. And they're every one of them caught game. Every one of them. Like they throw them up, they catch game, they pull out the next one. And that kind of like constant production and efficiency is only possible where you have a ton of game and where you've got the right So what I want to do is like not discourage people who don't have that, but at least educate them that that's possible. And that that exists somewhere, and it might exist where you are, but you just might be hunting the wrong quarry.
Yeah.
If you're in Georgia, where I went to high school in Columbus, Georgia, and you're trying to hunt, sadly, even like bobwhite quail, which used to be probably super prevalent in West Georgia, and now are almost non-existent, or you're trying to hunt cottontails, which are equally difficult to hunt. And you're ignoring squirrels because you think it's low rent quarry. Well, you are ignoring the one quarry that you have enough of to actually have great falconry, to actually experience wonderful falconry, great flights, catch game on a regular basis, make it work. Make a hawk that knows how to hunt. And this is available almost to all of us if we pick the right quarry, which is, essentially whatever we got the most of is that's where I start. Maybe that's not what you want to hunt, but whatever you got the most of, it's going to be a good place to start.
Well, people
you can
always
have the most fun and most success doing it that way.
Yeah, of course, and we should all want that. I think we should all want that.
From
I'm
a
very
learning,
suspicious. Yeah.
From a learning perspective, and this is something that I always tell every apprentice that I've had, and also every apprentice that I've talked to, is I said that the best teacher is success.
Yes.
You will learn very little from failing at falconry. You will learn very little, a little bit. If you're doing the right things and making mistakes, you can learn from those, right? But if you're doing the wrong things, you aren't going to be learning the right lessons. I think that's what I'm really getting to. And that really starts with the fundamentals of what do you have to hunt? If you have only a few ducks, like there's 2 lakes in your region, and you might see 2 ducks a day, and the ponds are covered with trees, thick foliage, you probably ought not to fly a peregrine.
Yeah.
Because you don't have anything to hunt them on. You're going to be spending a lot of time going out and trying with very little success. You're going to learn very little about falconry. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to give up. So success teaches.
Well, I think another way to put that is that success is rewarding, right?
Yeah.
And failure is punishment. And I think we do learn from rewards better than we learn from punishment. From punishment we learn things not to do. From rewards we learn things to pursue. We like the reward. We want to get the reward again. We're motivated by it. It's a pretty open-ended process whereby we might like that reward. We might like another reward, and we're sort of encouraged to pursue the second reward also. Punishment we just want to avoid.
Yeah.
And so so speaking to like hawk and ducks in difficult places, I know some falconers in East Georgia, sort of near the coast, who do successfully hunt wood ducks in the woods, essentially, with falcons.
Really?
And they're not, like it is about what you would imagine it. You don't see the flight, you don't see the catch. You track them down and pick up your bird on a wood duck, but it actually happened. And it's sort of amazing that it can happen. And I sort of, this was sort of the first duck hawking that I was introduced to. And I thought, well, this is amazing. Look, I didn't think you catch a duck with anything. We used to joke at the Georgia falconry meets that, we'd have a number for the number of rabbits caught and the number for the number of squirrels caught. And then there'd be birds written on there. And then somebody would just write impossible. And for years, nobody refuted that. But a few guys had figured this out, and so it can happen. But then when you compare that to what it looks like to hunt ducks in the Texas Panhandle, when you've got a pond that you could throw a stone across, and you've got 40 ponds within half an hour's drive that you can throw a stone across. There's no comparison.
Yeah, and because of the region, all the ducks get funneled into the ponds.
You got the flyway. Yeah. You've got a zillion kinds of ducks. 7 kinds of ducks that are perfect for young peregrines. It's not constrained at all. It's set up for success, and it takes a little bit of experience, a little bit of exploring. My friend Tom Coulson has always told me, and still says regularly to falconers, go away from where you are. Go out west, go north, go south, go someplace else, and see where it's really being done well. Whatever it is, this thing that you're trying to do, and you're going to learn more in those 4 days of just seeing it happen where it's supposed to happen than you will from any book or from any trying and failing at home, and you'll also bring things back to your home that you can use. And so indeed, I brought things back from California that I could use with my Merlin. It turns out, insufficient, because I can't bring big, vast sections of California back to Louisiana, which is really what would be required, to make it work.
That is the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, right. So, there are limitations to what you can do, and the real challenge in falconry is to figure out what your local habitat can provide. Figure out what your local and figure out what you can pursue yourself. Like, how much time do you have? What is your career? I'm talking to 2 or 3 people now who are flying new Kestrels, and one of them works nights. One of them works basically from home. They have, it's sort of typical of everybody. They've got all kind of different ways to make their living, and as it turns out, that has a big impact on your falconry, and your falconry has to, your falconry has requirements that maybe your job cannot provide for. That maybe your schedule cannot provide for, and so those limitations are very important that we understand. We may not like them, we may wish it were different, but we can't ignore the fact that that hawks work a certain way, and we need to adapt, at least halfway to meet them.
Yeah, that's just reality.
That's just reality, and the reality that you face when you ignore that. You need to recognize that as a kind of failure, and so I struggle with this, and when I'm brave enough to argue about it online, I get a lot of pushback on this idea that really you can fail in falconry, and that really your pursuit of sort of one kind of falconry might actually be a failure, even though you don't acknowledge that as a failure. You might say, hey, it's the best I can do, or hey, it's really all that we can do here with this weird hawk and this weird quarry that I can only go out and see twice a month.
Oh,
well, great, but I think you're essentially failing at falconry. You may be succeeding at the very niche hobby that you have carved out for yourself, but I think it also does a disservice to the idea that falconry can be very practical. That falconry, that you can actually catch a bunch of stuff with hawks, and you shouldn't apologize for that necessarily. I am. This is a little bit of my background as sort of a crude, sort of dirt hawking person, in the sense that I think you ought to come home with something in your bag, and I don't think that's wrong. I think hawks like it. I think that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah. I think it's good for them.
I think it's good for them. I think it's good for you. I think it teaches you more. I think, to your point, John, about success, it's successful. That's definitely what the hawks are trying to do every day. And so I don't know. Maybe I'm just not mature enough to really, find pleasure in the more esoteric kinds of falconry. But I think I'm not immune to beauty. Right. I love beautiful falconry, and I love difficult falconry, and I can appreciate. I think I am actually pretty well experienced in appreciating very difficult falconry. And my appreciation of the snipe hawking, for example, that happens in Arkansas is an appreciation that has grown from failing a lot, and from succeeding a lot, and from knowing the difference. And from knowing how difficult it is to do what these people do on a daily basis, and make it look easy, and actually argue about how to make it harder. These guys do, and by making it harder, they don't mean not catching stuff, right? They mean catching stuff every day in a more difficult way.
It's making it more of a challenge.
Yes, and that's So there is a difference between making it so hard that you see a beautiful flight but never catch anything, and then some guys who are out there, whether you like them or not, who are making it harder and catching stuff.
Well, making it harder, it's an interesting thing, because I think that more challenging flights are oftentimes more rewarding for us, because that interaction, that element it's important to falconry.
Well, it's rare. I mean, it's it has the excitement of being rare.
Yeah.
So people will tell me, look, early, I'm really interested in the flight. I really want to see a beautiful flight. Well, I want to see beautiful flights too, but I think the way to make beautiful flights is to catch a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And then some some fraction of those flights are going to be super beautiful.
It's be really exceptional. That they're the ones you tell the stories about.
You've got a hawk that expects to catch things. You've got a lot of quarry for it to catch. It's engaged. It knows what you're after. It knows how to hunt with you. You know how to hunt with it. Those are the falconers, in my experience, who see the most. Like, you want to talk about somebody who sees beautiful flights. These snipe hawkers, these Merlin hawkers. I mean red-tailed hawkers, Harris hawkers, who are in the right place doing the right thing with a lot of quarry, they're seeing great flights all the time.
Oh yeah.
Every day they'll catch 3 or 4 head, and they'll see maybe 3 dozen flights, and maybe 4 of them are like the best flights you ever saw. And that might be every day. I mean, so many good flights, you can't really write about it. And people push back against that. They say, well, that's not possible. That doesn't happen. Well, I'm here to tell you it happens. And it happens with in the right circumstances on a regular basis. And that should be your goal. That should be your goal in falconry.
You're not going to go wrong. You're not going to go wrong if that's your goal and if that's your approach.
Put your hawk, in front of a lot of game. You're not going to go wrong. I mean, what happens may, I don't know what's going to happen, but you're going to catch some things, and you're going to go home at the end of the day, and you're going to have some things in the bag, and maybe you can think tomorrow, well, look, 2 or 3 of those things were pretty easy. I know this hawk is pretty good. I flushed enough that I could maybe take a slip on the outside of the flock that got up, or take a slip, where the cover was a little bit more tough, and a little thicker, and see what I can do there, and challenge yourself if you want to, but don't pretend that failure is some sort of esoteric success. I feel like I'm on my high horse about this. I also don't want to do the jerk, because that's not me either. I fail all the time. I fail at easy falconry, like frequently. So let that be known. Yeah.
But I mean, that's nature too. That's part of nature is what everything you actually described as nature. It's like, okay, you have to have this much quarry to catch this much. And a wild predator, what is it normally, like 1 out of every 10? Like, you're going to have 9 failures in the wild normally.
Right.
So, I mean,
at least those are the ones that the researchers saw, right? And the researchers weren't necessarily staying up 24 hours a day, for the life of the animal that they were studying. So I mean, it's a numbers game, and I say it that way a lot. It's a numbers game,
And that's not the poetry of it, but that's the reality of it. That's truth. That is truth.
That is the truth, and
we can paint our paintings and write our songs about falconry, but what you're talking about is raw truth.
Yeah, and I think the further we get from that, or rather, the more that we pretend that that's not the truth, the worse the falconry gets. And the less we understand about falconry, actually, about why it works and what makes it work. So the fundamentals are really just those things that, without which, actually falconry doesn't work. You don't catch the rabbit, you don't catch the squirrel, you don't catch the quail, or if you do, it's really by accident, and you just haven't caught enough of them to know the difference. And that happens. And I'm like a product of that. I grew up without, the first 2 years in falconry with no instruction at all. So it was essentially, like a master class in failure. And the fact that I caught anything at all was amazing.
Well, I think, and the biggest thing here, and I think that the biggest reason why I recommend for falconry fundamentals to every single apprentice is start with this type of falconry, the falconry where you're going to have the best chances at success, so that you can learn the most, you can figure out what you like, you can figure out what game you have available to you, and try to create those situations where you're able to reproduce this experience, because that more fundamental examination of what is available to you and what birds are available to you it's an important piece to starting out.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody deserves everybody deserves a good grounding in falconry.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody who is trying to do falconry has something that they can hunt nearby. And I say everybody. Maybe there are people in the country that just cannot find, enough of the right kind of game or even a practical sort of game. And I appreciate that, and I sympathize with them. But I would say most of the people, in my experience, actually do have within practical, driving distance, enough game to catch game if they choose the right game.
Yep.
And start their falconry there. And everybody deserves that. Everybody deserves that. I've seen plenty of apprentices that just consistently fail. And it's not a happy scenario. Like, it's not fun.
It wears you.
It doesn't seem to be fun for them. It's not fun for me to hear it. And I think it's discouraging, which in a scenario, in a world where we should be encouraging people to appreciate falconry, right? Like, we should be, and you guys are wonderful at this, and I really appreciate the work that you do, to make falconry accessible, to make it fun, to make it like a thing that you can think about and talk about and seem engaged with and be engaged with. These are those are features of the best things in life, right? Like, those are features of the things that we really like to pursue, and whether that's sports or whether that's relationships or your career, there has to be a culture around it. There has to be some excitement about it, and you guys really bring a lot of excitement to it, and I really appreciate that, because the work of it is hard, right? Like, the work of falconry is hard, and the failure hurts, and the disasters are super disastrous. And so we really need the balance of a community of people who we can trust to say, hey, yeah, come on back into the fold, and let's talk about what happened, and let's get back on a horse and do it again, because you have found a sport that really is about people as much as it's about animals, right?
Exactly.
It's a cultural phenomenon as much as it is a biological or a ecological phenomenon.
Yeah, worldwide one.
Worldwide, and I had the pleasure and the honor and the luck to grow up in falconry. So when I was 13, I couldn't have driven anywhere. I sat literally on a cooler, and I snuck a beer, and I listened to the old people. Everybody was older than me. Everybody. And so the people who I would naturally have looked up to in any kind of scenario, they were all falconers. And turns out not all of them were worth looking up to, but you need to learn that, right? About any community, and that's how I grew up. And so I can tell you that the community aspect is very important. We don't talk about it enough. We never write about it. I say that it's a great segue. For a book that's about the cultural aspect of falconry. This is in season, and it's from Western Sporting. It's by me, and it's a year in the life of a falconer, me, with my kids, with my mother-in-law, with my wife, with my friends, how all that works. Where do I go? What do I do on Friday nights? How does my wife's job impact my falconry? How do my own parents think about what I do? It was essentially an exploration of a year of how falconry actually gets done by any of us, which is really not the time that you spend in the field. It's all the other times. It's the time you spend in the field for sure, but that's supported by your job and your family and your friends and where you live and what you drive and et cetera, et cetera. And I really wanted to explore that for a year. I had 2 small children. I wanted them to have some experience of falconry that was positive, that I didn't have growing up, because I wasn't a hunter growing up, prior to falconry. And so I wanted to fold all of that in. We go to New Orleans. I live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It's about 80 miles from New Orleans. Everybody knows New Orleans, home of great food and music. And when I was growing up, Tom and Jen Colson, who lived, within minutes of the city, and we just had a ball. We would hunt all day long in these incredibly rich fields for swamp rabbits and rails that were really within 10 minutes of the French Quarter. I mean, it's really a scenario that does not exist today and may never exist again, but for a time was a wonderful, place to grow up in. And I would come here and we would do that all day, and then we would go to the French Quarter at night, and that's part of my falconry. Like that is now part of how I appreciate falconry, is not just what we do in the field and why, but this conversation that we're having and going out for dinner with my friends and frankly, as we often do, not talk about falconry, right?
Yeah.
Like just
sharing the camaraderie that comes with it.
And to me, all of that is informative of your falconry and is helpful to your falconry and supports your falconry. So I guess do all that. If you're listening to this now and you're just starting out, don't be afraid of making friends. Don't be afraid of going to a field meet. Don't be afraid of figuring out where you exist in the little community of falconers that you're in. Be a part of it.
I think that's a thing that falconers tend to overlook sometimes, occasionally, because the falconry activity is somewhat of a loner's thing. We oftentimes go out alone, but we should go out together more often. We should and interestingly, Steve Shingren posted this. It was publicly, so I don't think he'd care. That he noticed when he's going through, he posts a lot of like historical stuff, Utah falconry history and stuff. Yeah. And he said that he noticed that there was a lot of pictures of birds, and he's like, well, a gyrfalcon from 1970 looks just like a gyrfalcon today, but the people have changed so much. So one of the things that he said in that post was take more pictures of the people. Remember, the people are what really stays with you. So
yeah,
that's just
sharing the experience, the whole thing.
Great point. That's a great point. And it reminds you of, how many times have you seen a mature falconer, an older falconer, post a picture from, sort of sepia toned and grainy of a bunch of guys with long hair, in front of a mountain and say, who can remember who all is here? And uniformly, you can't remember them all. I mean, uniformly, nobody, there is a guy on the end that nobody can remember who he was or what he did. And that's a shame. And I think that speaks to, to our raising awareness of who you're with now. Who do you hunt with now? Who do you like to go out with? This was part of the incentive for In Season was I wanted to record everybody I hunted with, and unfortunately I used most of their names. And they fortunately nobody reads your books, so they spared themselves embarrassment or insult. But I wanted to record exactly the slice of life, and I think everybody in some way should do that. And should appreciate that they practice falconry within a context, within a social context that's informative of their falconry. It improves their falconry. It helps them find game. It helps them find fields. It helps them place birds when birds need placement. It helps them get birds when birds need getting. The social aspect is an important piece of falconry, and which is not to say that you need to like everybody in falconry. No. So I mean, there's people. They're falconers.
That's part of the context too.
Yeah. No, that's 100%. And so I've got falconers people I love, who are still the closest of my friends, who were at my wedding, who would have been in my wedding if they could have been, and I've got falconers who I know who I wouldn't invite in my house. I mean, but we should know that that's also true. But isn't it amazing that you've got this sport where some of your best friends, the best friends you've ever had, the best friends you can imagine having are falconers. Mm-hmm. And who would deny themselves? Like, you should never deny yourself that pleasure of having your best, dearest friends also be like super excited about the thing that you're excited about. And your spouses know them, and your spouses sort of forgive them automatically for all the things they forgive you for. And this is a wonderful aspect of falconry. And then the fact that we can all point to the one person we don't like and say, oh, that guy, yeah, he's never invited back again. That's also somehow, I feel bad for that guy, but not too bad. But don't be that guy, don't be that person. Be the person who's got friends and who appreciates, like I have been the beneficiary of tremendous friendships, long-term friendships. I spend Thanksgiving with my friends in Amarillo, the Walkers, and that happened when I was a very young person and stumbled into Jimmy Walker, and it's been every Thanksgiving since for decades. And they're a part of my family. I hope I'm part of their family. That's a big part of my falconry. Or relationships like that, and I can point to. I'm fortunate to feel that I can point to several cities where I've got family that will take me in and have taken me in and actually look forward to me showing up. How about that?
Falconry bonds people.
It's amazing.
It really does, and it's a beautiful
amazing.
thing.
It's a beautiful thing. No, 100%.
Well, we're about hitting where we need to end to wrap things up. But everybody, we're going to have links to Matt's books. Please support them. And you okay if we link to your YouTube channel?
Yes, please. Link to the YouTube channel. The For Falconry Fundamentals is available on Amazon. In Season's available on Amazon. I would invite you to get my books from Western Sporting in particular. So David Frank at Western Sporting published In Season, and he published the American Kestrels and Modern Falconry, and while they're available at many fine retailers, I would point you to Western Sporting first, and of course on Amazon as well. Or just give me a call and I'll hook you up.
Awesome. Before we wrap up, last week's the bones. Let's see if I can get this on camera. This one, some of you got it right. It is an extinct Ice Age camel cannon bone, and this one, you guys got it right, is a woolly mammoth molar. So for next week, this is a skull. Do not let the size fool you. You notice the eye sockets are oddly low. We'll see who can get this before next week. But everybody, thank you so much for coming. Matt, thank you. It's an honor to have you here. Everybody support his channel, buy his books, and we'll put the links down below. And as always, happy hawking.